Welcome to another edition of Coaching in the Kitchen, and today I'm sharing something I love. I'm sharing my recipe for coconut cake. Now really, it's not my recipe, it's the one I use, but it was developed by, actually when I was a little girl, my Aunt Flores would make homemade coconut cakes for every reunion we ever had, especially for Easter. And we just loved them. It was something about that cake at Easter time that just resonated with all of us, made us feel light and like a new beginning in spring. Aunt Flores did it the old-fashioned way. She would actually take a coconut, take a nail, drive it into the coconut, get the milk out of the coconut, then split the coconut, shave the coconut. I do not do it that way. I have a different way of doing it. You may be wondering, what is all this about today? And this is really about this special week. It's for many people a holy week. For our Jewish friends, it's the week of Passover. For our Christian friends, it's the week of Easter. And I think for everybody, regardless of your faith, religion, your belief, that is a time of reflection. And it can be difficult now because many of us yearn for the way things were a year ago or the way things were 2 years ago. And this is a new year. This is a different time. And what I want to encourage you today is to value your traditions and also develop new traditions. So we're going to be talking about that a little bit while I'm baking this cake or putting this cake together. So to start off with, over here, I have already mixed together a cup of butter, which is really 2 sticks of butter. Mixed together in that also, let me look at my recipe, a half a cup of shortening. Some of you may not know what shortening is, but it looks like this. Many people would no longer be caught dead with Crisco in their cabinet than the man in the moon. But if you want a good coconut cake, you've just got to put a half a cup of this in it. And then 3 cups of sugar. Can you imagine 3 cups of sugar and we're not even begun yet? So I have creamed that together, and my recipe calls that you add 6 eggs and you add them one at a time. So I'm going to turn on the blender, and Jerry helped me get these eggs going, and we're just going to put them in one. Turn it up just a little bit. I don't know who came up with these recipes. Maybe whoever made this recipe just had 6 eggs, so that's what they used. I have no idea. But we add 6 eggs in. Just a little more. And there is a 6, and let those blend together. I think recipes are funny. Whether you realize it or not, you have recipes for everything in your life. You have recipes for how you start your day. You have recipes for how you manage your work. It's just the way you do things over and over again. And based on the people I've talked to, our recipes have changed a lot, particularly on how we conduct our work and what our family life looks like. For some people, you've never been around your family so many hours in a day, and I get that. And so you're trying to figure that out. For others, you've never spent your whole day working in isolation or talking on the phone to people. For many people, just the fact that you can't reach out and touch somebody physically is just such a stressful situation. And yet, you know what? When I look at the news every day, I see people coming through this with greatness, absolute greatness. So I was wondering today what you could reflect on as we're cooking. So what I thought maybe you could do was look at your own family rituals, your childhood rituals, whatever they were. Look at the ones you've created since childhood. What are those? And what will your new rituals be? And so as we cook this cake, I want you to think about that. I have to tell you something. When I was little, my sister Mary and I would always for Easter, we would have Easter gloves, we'd have Easter dresses, we'd have Easter petticoats on under those dresses, we'd have new socks with ruffles, new shoes, and something in our hair, and Daddy always gave us a little corsage. And somewhere in this video, you're going to see a picture of Mary and me and my brother Lamar, all dressed up in our Easter finery. But one of the things I remember most is my mama. My mama always had on her beautiful white gloves. She always had on a pretty hat and a brand new purse and brand new shoes and a brand new dress just for Easter. And I think that's what this time of year means to us. It's the beginning of something new. So let's make a cake and maybe you'll learn something new. This next part is pretty funny. It says to add the flour mixture and the milk mixture. And by the way, I'll have you the recipe. It'll be listed at the bottom of this video. The flour mixture first, and you alternate. So you put in some flour, you let it stir around. And let me just warn you, if you get it going too fast, it will start flying around the room because I did that earlier today. And then you add a little more flour, and I'm not sure why, but somebody in their infinite wisdom in a test kitchen somewhere said, this is the way it works best. So who am I to question it? And a little bit of more milk, a little bit of flour. And we're going to stop the video now while I continue this, and we'll be right back. I have to be honest with you. My mama was much better at being a school teacher than she was at being a homemaker. So she did not make very many homemade cakes. And the ones she made were good, but they were usually a sheet cake. She never mastered the layer cake. But I always wanted to learn how to make a layer cake. And you know, like anything you're learning new, whether it's Zoom calling or whether it's teaching your children algebra or whether it's connecting with your family and friends remotely, or taking care of household items that you really haven't had to take care of in the past, or even managing to shop for groceries and essentials. There's different ways to do it, and there's always tips you can learn. So I'm going to share a couple of tips with you that my friend Louise taught me. One thing she told me to do is to get good heavy-duty aluminum pans. If your cake looks lopsided when you take it out of the oven, if the layers look lopsided, it's because they have baked at different temperatures. So you get really good pans, and then line the pans with a little cutout of parchment paper. So you just line the pans with parchment paper. And for additional, make sure you spray with Baker's Joy. Now I used to stand in my kitchen and spray over my counter until my friend Barry said, Shirley, you make a mess on your counter. Do this over the sink. So you're always picking up new tips on how to make your cake better. I've never been able to just measure out the batter, so what I generally do is just take a cup and just pour it between the 3 layers until all 3 layers are about even. By the way, when you weren't looking, I did add a little vanilla to the batter at the very end. My friend Louise is a great cook. She bakes cakes. She is also a great artist. In fact, I want to share with you a photograph or a painting that she did for my house. Jerry, if you'll turn the camera around, let's look at Louise's art. You know, we all have different talents, don't we? Some of us can bake a cake. Some of us can paint a picture. Some of us can do both. Some of us can teach algebra. Some of us can teach the alphabet or the multiplication tables. Some of us can teach other people how to Zoom or how to FaceTime. We've all got our talents, so pay attention to your talents. I love this painting. Louise calls it Coming Home. And one of my favorite things about it is that right here on this bow, she put Camp Garrett. I just love this. Okay, so now it's time to put these beautiful cakes in the oven. And I have to tell you that if you use 9-inch cake pans, chances are they won't all 3 fit in the oven. So you have to cook 2 and then the third one separate. The key here is you don't want your pans touching. You want space around each pan. With my 8-inch pans, I can do all 3 at once. And while those are cooking, I thought I would come back and tell you a little story. And then we're going to add the icing to the cake. Several years ago, in fact, many years ago, my now 30-year-old grandson was visiting at the house, and we were standing over by this window over here looking outside, and it was just pouring down rain. It was just pouring down rain, and it was a summer day. So, of course, he just wanted to go outside and play. And he's looking out the window, and he just kind of droopy, standing there looking out the window. And I walk up behind him. I put my hands over his shoulder. And he looks up at me, and I kind of hug him into myself. We're both looking in the same direction. And he said, Gran, did you know that when certain people hug you, it fills up your heart a certain number of spaces? I said, what'd you just say? He said, when certain people hug you, it fills up your heart a certain number of spaces. That night I was putting him to bed. And I said, so Zeke, how many spaces are in your heart? And he looked up and he said, without a blink, he said, 10.
He said, but Grand, 7 have to be full for you to feel good. I want you to think about that as we ice the cake. How do we fill up our heart spaces and those heart spaces of those around us so that they're at least a 7 so they feel good? Okay, this can be your favorite part or your most dreaded part, and that is icing the cake. So once again, Louise gave me some tips. First of all, when you cook your icing, cook it just a little longer than you think it should be cooked, and it should be thickened like this. It's sugar and milk and butter. Of course, more sugar, more milk, more butter. I don't know about you, but when I ice a cake, I get icing everywhere, but when I cook, I get everything everywhere. You don't know how many times we've cleaned up just during this one video. So Louise says, take your cutouts from that you use to make your circles for your pans, like this, and take the edges of those and just tuck under your cake so that when you're icing your cake, then it doesn't get all over your glass plate. So you can go ahead and ice it on your plate that you want to serve it on. So what I generally do is ice one layer at a time, or coat one layer of the cake at a time. So it has icing on it, and then go ahead and do the sides. So I did not have one of these for the first 65 years I cooked, but I have one now. This helps. If you don't have one, just take a spoon or a large knife so you can just spread it out and just spread it over the edge till it drips over. And one of the great things about what I've been able to do is I was able to take these layer cake. You might notice this, you probably didn't, but I'll tell you. There's 8-inch cakes in the oven, and these are 9-inch that I made earlier. So I put them in the refrigerator to cool them a little bit, so then the cake doesn't tear when you put an icing on it. So if I'm just icing over the edge and just let it dribble over the edge, and then ready for the next layer. Just put the next layer on and repeat the process. So I want you to think about a couple of things while we take this next little break and we finish icing the cake. When you look back on the spring and the Holy Week of 2020, how do you want to be remembered? What memories do you want your children, your family, your loved ones to have? So as we finish up this cake, just put that in your mind. So there you have it, the perfect, I don't know, maybe the not so perfect coconut cake. I was delighted to make this cake and share the recipe with you. But what I really want to leave with you is the thought about what Zeke said about those heart spaces. He was right, wasn't he? When certain people hug you, it fills up your heart a certain number of spaces. But we can't go around hugging very many people these days. That's just the way it is. And when this virus is over, we may be a little bit more cautious about hugging so many people. But we can hug people in so many different ways than just the physical hug. We can hug them with the words we speak. We can hug them with the smile we give them. We can hug them with the thank you for serving us in whatever capacity they serve us. Or we can hug them by sharing our gifts with them. The gift of music, the gift of art, the gift of cooking, the gift of kind words, the gift of a card, the gift of a letter. You know what it is that you are gifted to do. So during this Passover season, the season of Easter, and the season of spring, however you celebrate it, please celebrate it and think about a way that you can fill your own heart space, maybe by a trip down memory lane or creating a new tradition. Fill up your own heart space and then reach out and fill up the space of others. I can promise you, I'm going to have a piece of this coconut cake, and it's going to fill my heart space and it's going to fill my belly. But then I'm going to take a part of it and share it with their neighbors. That's the way that I can hug. You find your way to hug. Happy Passover. Happy Easter. Happy spring.